Hancock is an interesting relic of the early 2000s, from before the explosion of superhero blockbusters. Back when Hancock came out in 2008, I was a teenager, and at that time, I rather enjoyed the film. I think I went to see it for my birthday. Despite my enjoyment back then, I've always had criticisms of Hancock, and in more recent years, I began to mostly associate the film with those criticisms, thinking of it as a film that has a really good first half and then completely falls apart after that. But a few days ago I dusted off my old Hancock DVD and gave the film a rewatch, pleasantly surprised by how enjoyable I found it. There's no doubt the film has significant flaws, but it's also got some great virtues. Characterising the film is kind of tricky because it's so unusual in its tonal and plot shifts. There are good and bad things about it, but what's the ratio? Is the film more bad than good, or more good than bad? And what place does it have in the Western superhero cinema collection? Let's try and work that out, shall we? I'll start by going into the problems and questionable choices the film has. Firstly, in the latter category, it's a bit weird that the villain, bank robber Red, is introduced so late into the runtime. It might have made more sense for him to have been one of the criminals stopped by Hancock at the very start, with a slightly altered version of the scene where Hancock messily apprehends the criminals in the film's opening. Or Red could have been the one in charge of such gangs shown in the opening, increasingly frustrated by Hancock continually foiling their crimes throughout the story. Red could then land in prison as the result of a later encounter with Hancock, then escape to go after Hancock in the climax. While the way this villain is used is not massively egregious, given the context of the film's story, having him shoehorned in so late, then to be given such little time for character development, makes for a slightly odd story structure. I think Red is only in 3 scenes, one where he meets Hancock at the bank robbery, a second where he's in prison, forming a gang to go after Hancock, and then when he and his gang fight Hancock in the final act. I don't think we find out how Red and his gang get out of prison, do we? They're just out in time for the climax. Correct me if I've forgotten anything there. I suppose in defence of that aspect, Hancock's main battle is with himself and discovering his past. Rather than being engaged in an ongoing war with a particular nemesis, like traditional superheroes face, his character arc is built for him to reconcile his internal struggles so that he can become a better hero. So the Red character functions more as an obstacle for Hancock to overcome on that larger journey. That's kind of interesting, and it would have been good if that kind of character study had been properly followed through with, rather than being so diminished by the plot turn revealing Mary to be superpowered as well, and to have a romantic history with Hancock dating back thousands of years. After this reveal, it's established that Hancock and Mary lose their powers when getting too close for too long. Let's call it love kryptonite. The rest of their species all died off because they paired up and became mortal. This aspect is more than just a questionable choice, but is the film's biggest problem. I don't want to understate anything here. This is an incredibly stupid story mechanic. It invites the audience to root against the protagonist reuniting with his lost love. Even if that story mechanic wasn't included, the circumstances the core characters are set up in do not put us in a position where we should be rooting for Hancock to reunite with his lost love. Mary is in a happy marriage with Ray, who is a good man himself. Actually, a better man than Hancock in many ways. And Mary is the surrogate mother to Ray's son. So with that setup, adding this thing where Hancock and Mary are like soulmates with a 3,000-year history, destined to be together, makes the whole situation just feel icky and completely undesirable for the story. It would be different if, with that idyllic family setup Ray and Mary have, Hancock came in and started having an affair with Mary, further illustrating his moral failings, adding more texture to his character, and an interesting character drama situation that would lead to catastrophe, Hancock perhaps learning from the experience and carrying it with him as he goes forward trying to be a worthy hero. But what we were actually given was messy and felt like part of the plot that hadn't been properly mapped out. Another reason this love kryptonite element doesn't work for the story is that, based on the trajectory of his character arc before the love kryptonite reveal, and just the fact that this is a superhero blockbuster that carries certain audience expectations, we're positioned to want Hancock to be a hero. Which means we have to want him to avoid being with the person he's destined for. What a total mess this stupid story mechanic creates. And it doesn't end there. There are more problems it causes, like this. The message about Hancock's place in the world and the meaning of him as a hero is very muddled. There are numerous instances where remarks are made by characters about Hancock being here for a reason, that he's a hero and that helping humanity is his purpose, etc. All very inspiring, but it doesn't really feel true once we learn that Hancock only maintains his powers by keeping away from the woman he has loved for thousands of years, and that to be a hero, he must deny himself the woman he's destined to love. So more than him becoming complete by fulfilling the role of hero he was put on Earth to serve, it seems more like Hancock's just being a hero because he may as well, since there's nothing better for him. It's like he's killing time as a hero until he can be with Mary again, once Ray eventually dies. It's so emotionally confused. The whole love kryptonite thing really is something that drags so many important parts of the story down. But now let's move on to what actually works well about this film. As a character, I think Hancock is quite compelling. The concept of an alcoholic, reckless superhero with non-existent social skills, who means well, but always makes a mess of things when trying to help people, is interesting. Building off this setup, one of my favourite things about the film is when Hancock voluntarily serves time in prison for the damage he's caused during his reckless heroics. Not only is it interesting to watch a superhero navigate the prison environment, and watch how his character develops as a result, but it's also entertaining to watch the other inmates who hold grudges against him for putting them in there pick a fight with him and very quickly regret it afterwards. It's a weirdly fun thing to watch Hancock in this dreadful place where everyone hates him, but he's untouchable, and for him to play along with his punishment to show people he's trying to change, when he could just fly out whenever he wants to. I like the fact that Hancock's a superhero who wants to be good overall, but has some really bad qualities. He's not just a grumpy, reckless alcoholic, but once cleaning up his image, becoming sober and leaving prison, he also makes a move on Mary, his friend's wife, before he finds out who Mary really is. It's cool that there's this grimy texture to the Hancock character. It makes him more interesting, and lays out a long path for him to journey to become a better person and worthy hero. As already mentioned, it would have been nice if this character study element had been stuck with for the whole film, leading to Hancock's character arc concluding with overcoming the dishonourable side of his nature, rather than abandoning that element for the annoying love kryptonite thing, but oh well. While the love kryptonite thing is stupid, annoying, and drags the story down in all sorts of ways, other aspects of the vague mythology that's mentioned in the film, explaining how Hancock and Mary have lived for thousands of years and been called different things by different cultures, gods and angels in the past, and now superheroes in the modern age, I quite like. And I think given the most interesting thing about Hancock is the albeit botched character study element of this alcoholic superhero, it's good that there's only vague mention of some of the details of this mythology, to keep the focus on the heart of the story. The climax of the film is much better than I remember. I previously thought that section was really bad. Having Hancock weakened to fight a gang of escaped convicts once seemed like an unforgivably underwhelming climax to a story about a hero with such immense power. But it's actually pretty cool, and maintains the tone of this more street-level crime-fighting story that Hancock tells, rather than building to some world-threatening event. In this climax, Hancock's powers are fading. He's recovering from a gunshot wound, and then has to fight Red's gang while protecting Mary, who has also been shot. He takes on this fight while still strong enough to break through walls and throw heavy objects like they're beach balls, but his skin is no longer impenetrable, and so he suffers a stab wound and many more gunshot wounds. With the stakes raised for Hancock in the fight against this gang, when he's brutal with them, using his super strength to launch heavy objects at them and throw men through windows, it feels justified and viscerally pleasing, with more tension and payoff to his successful attacks than in any other fight he's had in the film. Hancock was originally an adult story, but over time got increasingly watered down to make it suitable for younger audiences. The script was drastically changed multiple times, and after test audience reactions, some of the darker elements were even toned down in the version that was shot. Rather than a hardcore adult superhero deconstruction, as previous iterations of the film were scripted to be, the studio opted to turn it into a mass appeal blockbuster. Normally, I would lament that, but to be honest, in this case, I'm actually okay with it. While I certainly wouldn't object to a few more mature elements being added to the story, overall, I like Hancock and think the film works well as a blockbuster with a hero we can root for to turn his life around, rather than becoming an antagonist, as seems to have been the plan in, I think, what was the penultimate script for the property. So what am I to conclude about Hancock? While it has some significant flaws, one really significant flaw, I think there's enough to love in this film. Even, to my surprise, things to enjoy in its problem-addled second half. In fact, I actually think, if not for the mistakes made that detract from its qualities, Hancock could have been a bit of a classic, standing out as a unique original IP with a well-earned place of appreciation in the lineage of modern superhero films. Overall, I'm pleased to say that I still like Hancock. I think the protagonist is compelling, and some aspects of the mythology are decent. Back in 2008, it was really cool to have an original superhero IP like this, and in many ways, Hancock is a very good attempt at one. So I suppose I have to say, I think there's more good in this film than bad, and it still has solid enough entertainment value to be worth a watch. Anyway, what do you think? Are you a fan of Hancock? Or are its flaws too big for you to overlook? Let me know in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.